The best lawyers aren't found in the big law firms. They're found in the stories of those who left. All good. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Sell.Life podcast. Now, a very interesting episode. Podcast launched about a month or two ago. So by the time this one comes out, everyone will be used to me doing interviews with Aussie lawyers. But this is an exciting one because I've gone international. And the reason being, George, on the call right now with me, approached me in a way that it's a kindred spirit because it's how I've done BD for a long time. You find someone who's facing the problem right now and you position a solution in front of them and then put a price on it. And George did all three in basically 3 messages to me. And Courtney said, you have to get him on a podcast because clearly he's been implementing, without having to learn them from me, the lessons that you try and teach lawyers. So George, welcome to the show.
Firstly, thank you for that introduction. That's very kind. Secondly, I feel like I should probably apologise to your listeners for the slightly alien accent they're now listening to comparably as well. But yeah, no,
it's all... We're definitely, Courtney's done the origins of Aussie, and I tell anyone when I'm talking to the UK, we are the descendants of your convicts. So we can't say our language is obviously the obscure one. Yours sounds proper. We still look to the proper English. So, but we're going to follow the same format we have. So I want to start with, when did you decide to become a lawyer and what led you down that path of a law degree?
Wow. So quite a long time before I even went to law school. I think it was probably various instances round the dinner table with family, friends, and being sort of told in a, well, complimentary way, probably not, that you're somewhat argumentative and you might want to consider going down the barrister route, which didn't know much about at the time. I, as you do various work experiences growing up, and I remember shadowing one lawyer in particular at my first ever law firm I worked at. I won't embarrass him by saying his name, but I sort of remember rotating between different seats, doing different areas of law, and being completely, I guess, captivated by that area he was practicing in. So much so that I think I actually said, after a few days shadowing him around the office, is there any chance he could sort of put a word in and basically put a roadblock almost in the way of me then having to go on to, I think it was residential conveyancing department or something like that. So I ended up essentially spending the rest of my placement there and never really looked back after that in terms of that area. So much so, going through degree, etc., and not really having a massive interest in any other area of law. So quite unusual in that I sort of knew quite early what area I wanted to do, and I appreciate that's not going to be reflective of a lot of people's experiences who don't actually know until they're sort of midway through what's called a training contract over here, where you're sort of trying different areas and doing different seats in a law firm. So slightly unusual and ahead of time there, I guess.
Yeah. So did that, with the study, did it make it easier, or was it more like a lot of the subjects were a nuisance because you knew I'm never gonna practice in this area?
The slight difficulty actually was at law school, or at university, sorry. The area of law that I now do was not a required module. So you have criminal law, tort law, land, various other areas which you are mandated to do and you have to do. So it was a little bit of a bun fight going into, I think it was my final year, to do IP law, because, to be completely transparent, I had not been particularly sort of engaged with the modules that I had been doing up until the final year. So it was sort of quite risky, actually, I suppose, with hindsight. And I was sort of looking to that final year going, that is the area that I want to do. Obviously, had I not have done it, there are still avenues into the profession, but it's sort of confirmed to me that was the avenue I wanted to do. Because to be completely honest with you, there wasn't really another area of law at that time which sort of I was sold on practicing for the rest of my days. So yeah, quite fortunate in that respect. And then you complete university, you do your 2 years of law school, you do your 2 years of training. which was, when did that? University was 2011, so uh, about 15 years ago or so now.
Yep.
And then took a small gap in between, paralegals for a few years, and then went straight in, trained, qualified, and that was I'm trying to think, am I 6-7 years post qualified now, I think, give or take.
Yep.
Once you get beyond 2 or 3, you sort of lose track, don't you? But
Well, in Australia, once you're in Australia, 2 years, we have a restricted practicing certificate, so you must be supervised for 2 years.
yeah,
Beyond that, basically, you're welcome to start your own firm is the rules in Australia. So but yeah, a lot of people, once it gets to a point, as I tell anyone, the client, I've never had a client, and I'm technically if I was actually practicing, I'd be a first or second year lawyer, but I've never had a single client ever ask for my degree, for my grades in uni, or for, they come to you and they want to, I don't know if it's like that over there, but I tell anyone, if you can serve the client and add value to the client, they'll keep coming back to you. They assume you're technically proficient because you have the title of lawyer.
Yeah, I think once you get beyond that sort of junior level, so once you're what we would call 2-3 years post qualified, you're kind of in the sort of mid associate range there. And I think in terms of technical proficiency, you're the training wheels are well and truly off, aren't they, at that point?
And so, because it is interesting that you had such a love and desire to sort of follow that IP stuff. Was it a particular case or a particular client that you dealt with, or what was the thing that you were like, oh, I could happily do this for the next decade or more?
I think what I liked about it is, well, actually, I guess to step back a stage, one of my parents basically is my father is a graphic designer by trade. So I've grown up, he's always worked with brands, IP. Sadly for me, I did not get that creative gene at all. That went to my brother. But I think maybe there is possibly a bit of, could it be down to sort of genetics there? Maybe, I don't know. But I think in terms of the work experience, I think what really drew me to it in particular is brands are everywhere, aren't they? There's something quite I can almost imagine the eye rolls in response to this. But there's something quite cool about sort of wandering around and seeing sort of brands going, oh, I worked with that, I did that, or I sort of helped with that, or sort of seeing the impact it has upon consumers. It's very current, it's very relevant. They are everywhere. I mean, they would dictate, for example, if you're going to go down to the shop and buy your groceries, a brand may well dictate what loaf of bread you buy or what carton of milk, etc., etc. So I think that sort of current element, the fact that they are very important to sort of how you operate on a day-to-day basis. Another aspect I really liked about it was it's very sector agnostic. So I have, for example, friends who work in corporate law and they primarily work in private equity, for example, or you speak to someone in commercial property, they will generally have some sort of sector focus. IP, patents aside anyway, is not really like that, which, I mean, who doesn't like variety? It's kind of my take on it. And you sort of, as a result, you work with all sorts of businesses, varying in sizes, sectors. So I think that's a really useful and quite interesting and engaging element to it. And it was something I picked up on really early. I remember there was one company it was like a sports merchandise company, and the next I think it was a software platform or something like that. But even in those sort of few days of shadowing another lawyer, seeing, oh wow, there is a lot of variety to this job. And I've got to think, actually, there was another a classic deal with a lot of these is sort of a Getty Images tapping a sole trader on the shoulder and saying, you've used our photo without paying a license fee, and having to sort of navigate that one. So yeah, I mean, just to give you sort of a brief flavour there, it's very varied, and I think that's a large part of it, to be honest, because ultimately you sort of mentally, as lawyers, we need to be engaged and sort of on it. So that's kind of why, I guess.
Well, it's a great way to touch on it. I did a podcast earlier today with funnily enough, another lawyer in Australia called George. And he was saying he wasn't able to pursue his creative side. He was actually very creative, but due to family conditions, he had to follow law. But he said, I like that I can protect the creators, because he said these people who create things and produce something and invent something and create a brand like you protect, he said it's like the nearest thing that I could do to be so close to it that I'm still involved in it and I still get to be creative in my own way. I just didn't have that mental. And I'm the same. I'm fortunate to have a wife who's far more creative than me. I can talk and I can sell ice to Eskimos, but other than that, I don't have design. I know when it looks good. I know when I like the look of something, but I can't piece it. And every time, Courtney, I start with something, give it to her, and then she pieces it together and makes it actually whole. So, yeah. Well, now let's go into the journey of, so you knew what you were going to do, you got into law. In Australia, we talk big law, mid law, and then boutique sole practitioners. What was your sort of firm size that you were working in?
So I started, this is the firm I did a placement at. I was there for 5 years in totality. So paralegaling, training, and then newly qualified. That was probably what I would call a regional firm. So they had offices in the southwest of England, and one in London. So I think and they would hate me for saying this, I think that they sort of pitched themselves at a nationwide firm with the London office. But I think, in reach, it was somewhere between sort of nationwide and regional level. So probably a mid-size to sort of go back to your comparison. So started there for 5 years, trained there, got some really good experience, and my boss there always sort of have an element of sentimentality. I think looking back at it, 'cause he was extremely invaluable in sort of giving me that grounding, technically, and I think also I think in terms of sort of those soft skills and how to sort of manage people, deal with their expectations. Lawyers sometimes get quite a bad rap, I think, with the latter point. And some, I think, would say is probably warranted and deserved. But I have to say he was very much an exception to the rule in that respect. So I do. Well, I mean, you leave a job for a whole host of reasons, and often there are frustrations to why you move on. But no, that he in particular was certainly not one of them. But no, I was there for 5 years, and then took the plunge into what you would well and truly call sort of big law with a big international firm in the city, and again spent a similar time there as well. So around the 5-year mark.
And so that the bigger firm, what sort of I know it's going to be astronomically larger than big firms in Australia simply due to population size, but how many lawyers in a firm of the bigger firm? Like how many were you one of?
It was definitely 4-figure. We in the UK, you probably know this already, and probably a lot of your listeners will probably know this already, but we have over here what's called the Magic Circle of law firms. So they are, well, traditionally it was based on revenue, and if a law firm in a UK based one, I appreciate they have offices all around the world, if they were turning over more than 1 billion GBP, so I think is that Aussie dollars is double that, isn't it? So 2 billion Aussie dollars.
I always go, it's always double, yeah.
Give or take, then you're classed as a Magic Circle firm. Now, over time, there are firms that have broken that barrier. Some of those traditional ones have fallen by somewhat, but the firm I was at was, I think it was around 600 to 700 mil. So it was sort of after the biggest ones in the UK. It was the next sort of one after that. In terms of headcount, I think it was in the thousands, but they had offices primarily all over Europe and over a lot of Southeast Asia and the Gulf. But it's funny, a lot of even the biggest firms, there are a few exceptions, don't tend to have a massive footprint in the US, over here anyway. And the reason for that is referrals, because I think the UK, because of obviously language, is quite an obvious entry point into the European market. So a lot of firms here will go, well, hang on, we're going to completely cut away our legs if we stick an office in the US, because US firms are a really good flow of work for us, and if they see we've got an office, then they're not going to give it to us anymore because they know they're not going to get it back.
Yep.
So yeah, it was a lot bigger firm than what I had been at before. I mean, 15 times the size, I would say, give or take.
Yeah. And was it the feeling, and this is just through how many lawyers I've interviewed who have been at the bigger firms, is it that you are, I call it a cog in the billable machine, and your job is to put your head down and work, or was it a better experience for you?
I mean, suffice to say that the hours were significantly longer, which you would expect. I think what was quite strange is I'd gone from, I didn't work in the head office of the regional firm, so they were basically split over 2 floors, and because there weren't as many IP lawyers at the regional firm, you sort of sat within a bigger corporate commercial department. And at the big international firm, that wasn't the case. The IP department was the IP department, and there was, I want to say, maybe just 75 IP fee earners just in London. So big team, but you kind of, because you were sort of split out over, and this office was 6-7 floors or something in the city of London, it didn't really feel that different, because I think you were still, obviously you were sat in a more sort of niche team, but there was still your sort of team of 60-70 people. So that aspect of, I guess, the size comparably didn't quite translate. I mean, you definitely didn't get the reach across the firm like you would at a regional firm. So a regional firm, I would know most people in lots of different departments. At a big international firm, you're quite siloed away within your team. I think it's kind of hard to, in terms of your point about what was sort of expectations and sort of billable hours, but it's quite hard to, I think, to make a real accurate comparison between expectations, because I think at a regional firm, for me, those were like my really early training years. So all the focus was on training, getting qualified, doing the work, but not really business development. So it's kind of hard to know how that would have looked comparably. What I would say is, in an international firm, business development is just not hugely encouraged. It's kind of, and I think this will probably be a precursor for where this conversation may go, but what tends to happen is, I think you obviously have your crazy billable hours targets, which are, I want to say, 7-8 hours chargeable per day. So that obviously doesn't factor in any admin, all that other stuff that you're doing. And basically, if you want promotions, pay rises, bonuses, you need to hit that, and that's a prerequisite. Yep. You then get to sort of mid to more senior associate level, and you'll then sort of be told, look, well, if you want to make partner, you need a book of business which equates to X amount per annum. And you're also just scratching your head going, but hang on, where are the extra hours in the day? Because I've got to this stage because I need to hit certain amounts of hours. I can't suddenly turn around to the partner I'm working for and say, oh, by the way, I want to make partner. And I mean, perhaps, but let's be blunt about it. Probably steal some of your lunch and make partnership. So basically, can you give me less hours? You can bet your bottom dollar how that conversation's probably going to go. So you're suddenly, I guess, in between a little bit of a rock and a hard place, where you need to put the hours and dedicate it to doing pure billable work to get to that sort of rung on the ladder underneath partner. But then to make that final step, it kind of serves as a bit of a conflict for those who are your superiors and your partners, and it is just not in their interests for you to take that final step, because there can be a little bit of a squirreling mentality in the legal industry, which I'm probably sure you're familiar with. And partners are, of course, under massive amounts of pressure. They don't want to give away their revenue to you. They also need someone to be doing that work, and both those elements essentially then point to, well, that's not going to serve your interests in terms of making partnership. And also, by the way, because there is so much work, where are you going to find the time to go out and bring in, we're talking half to 750,000 GBP revenue per year to actually make a case for partnership. So and this is a lot of, it's a frustration that a lot of people find. I had some, what I consider friends now from that law firm who left at a similar stage, sort of mid associate to senior associate level.
Yep.
And because of those frustrations, because to be perfectly honest, about 5 years further ahead, there were a raft of senior associates who had got to that point, and to be perfectly honest, you could just tell were just completely stuck.
Yep.
Super flat structure, no progression, no ability to go out and actually win the work, because they obviously had to do the work being passed to the partners. The partners didn't want to share it, and it was kind of a little bit of a difficult cycle, really, where sort of a lot of us, I think, wanted to try and get ahead of the curve there, really, and not fall into that trap.
Yeah. Well, the hamster, and it's nice to hear it from. That's why I love every now and then spicing up the podcast with an international guest to go. I had a feeling the legal law firms all over the traditional ones, the big ones that we all refer to them as, had the same structure always. And there's a famous Charlie Munger quote, but he says, "Show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcomes." And that was the first thing I noticed when I got into law. I was doing business development in a firm, and the senior associates kept leaving. And I sat down with the partners and said, I'm the one dealing with the clients who complain when the people doing all the work, the senior associates, leave, because then new associate comes, client goes, well, why is someone learning? And I'm getting charged for someone to learn my business. And I said, why do we keep churning them out? They're like, well, what's it matter? We'll get new ones next year. And I said, so you guys are aware that you're burning people out, dangling partnership to them like it's a golden goose, knowing that they're never going to get there. And even if they get close, you'll cut them. And unless someone is absolutely almost ruthless enough to claw their way to that top, then you might let them in, but you'll probably be ready for retirement. And that was it was a very honest conversation, because they all said, that's the model.
Yeah.
Like it or lump it. And I was like, oh, wow. Like it was pretty glaring to me, because I was new to the legal industry, but I was like, oh, wow, like, not a conspiracy theory. This is actually just what the model that has been built up over the last few decades is.
Yeah, I must have, because I was fairly junior when I joined this firm, and sort of when you're training, I guess working for a firm like that is, I mean, if we're being completely objective, it's sort of the holy grail almost. You sort of go, wow, I have that on my CV. The world almost is my oyster now, although you don't realize that if you sort of overstay, then you can actually find yourself that ceiling will come quite quickly, and it will be very, very hard to break it. But what I didn't appreciate at the time, or know, to be honest, and it probably wouldn't have deterred me, because I wasn't thinking that far ahead quite at that point. I mean, naturally you go, I want to make partner, but you don't maybe quite understand the mechanics at such a junior level. But what had happened about a year or two maybe prior to me joining was an even bigger fish had essentially gobbled up a lot of the partners in the IP department of the firm I went to. And as I'm sure you can imagine, they took a lot of good clients, restrictive covenants and whatnot stopped some of them going over, and obviously needed someone ideally off partner level to service those clients. So rather than going on, was a combination of things actually. There was a massive 3-firm merger in the city going on at the time. So any of the surplus partners they took. And in addition to that, just promoted a lot of very senior associates to partnership at that point. Obviously, a lot of them were actually quite young to be making partner, and probably, give or take, maybe 10 years older than me or so only. So what inadvertently I'd actually stepped into a setting whereby that kind of round of partner promotions had happened, and it had created a super flat structure. All the partners were very, very young, unusually young for a team of that size, which again is obviously because another way, and this did happen with another partner, is a retirement is also a way where if you're obviously very cliquey with a partner that retires, then if you naturally that work has to go somewhere. So if you get it by default, that's often quite a common way whereby people at the big firms get partners, or in those instances where you have massive restructures of teams, or if you have a real niche within your area which you're just a thought leader on, and they almost have to make you partner almost because you're the only person with that sort of technical level. So there are obviously exceptions to the rule, but those sort of three instances are quite not common, but quite probably easier ways of, I think, getting partnership. And obviously, a lot of people at my level would essentially come into the firm with two of those scenarios, i.e., a team restructure and a retirement, and sort of a real sort of junior round of partner promotions, where they're not that much older than mid to senior associates, and suddenly you're going, wow, okay, this is going to be really, really difficult now to make partnership. And like you say, they'll never say it, but a lot of these firms they trade on that reputation of people want to come here. So if you want to leave for that reason, then so be it. Because if you can't immediately bring us in that revenue for what we require for you to make partnership, then yeah, they can be quite cutthroat and ruthless about it. It's quite transactional.
No, well, which does lead me to my favorite part of every episode I do. I am the co-founder with my wife of the Self-Employed Lawyers League. So obviously, at what point did the idea come into your head that maybe I can just go do something for myself? And how long between idea to stepping out did it take you?
So I went through, so after university, I went through law school with someone who, again, I won't name them, but they were training at a boutique IP firm. And the founder there has since had the boutique acquired. It's quite a big acquisition in the sort of the UK IP space. But I kind of saw firsthand from my friend I was going through law school with, what it was like him sort of going on that journey, working with a founder. And obviously it was very, very different from my experience. And I sort of would double down on that now, 18 months deep. But I remember there with him and another person through law school, always sort of saying, in future, could we potentially do something like that? So always kind of harbored an interest in doing that. So, I mean, that was probably around 5 years ago. So had harbored an interest for a while, but like with all these things, you weigh up the risk reward, and unfortunately, lawyers by trade are naturally super risk averse people, with a few exceptions. I'm certainly not an exception to that, very risk averse. And I was then getting to the end of my time at the international law firm, which was I think that's probably around 3 years ago now. And I was in the process of moving, and I moved to the sort of the boutique IP firm, who they're a lot more sort of established, quite sort of old school one. And within, this sounds awful, within probably a day or two, I knew straight away. I went, no, this is not for me. This is not right anymore. It sort of took a few months to sort of begin making sort of preparations or having a think about how I would transition myself out of it. So it was probably about 2 years ago where I really started putting time and effort and thought into how I was going to go about that. But probably 3 years previous, had been sort of mulling it over, not with the intention of doing it quite as hastily, but I think that final move was that sort of the penny dropped where I went, doesn't matter whether I work at a regional firm, an international firm, a boutique firm, wherever it is, there is something intrinsic with the legal profession and how it operates, which just does not sit right with me. It's not how I want to be operating or working for the next however long. So plans were essentially expedited, and sort of forced into it, to be honest. I it's funny. I went on holiday with a friend last week, actually, who we lived with when I first moved to London, and he works in tech sales, and he could not fathom how the legal industry functions compared to his industry. He was just like, but I used to getting home at a ridiculous time every night, and he's like, I don't understand how you're doing all these hours and how that just isn't incentivized. Now, lawyers get paid
Yeah.
in the most part quite well, but it's not a hugely incentivized field. Then based on hours, like bonuses, things like that, it's just not. Yeah, you're just not really incentivized to win work or et cetera, et cetera. So that's that always stuck with me, and that was probably about 5 years ago. But yeah, probably around 2 years ago, we're sort of firm plans after that move where I went, yeah, this is not sustainable. I have to do something about this, because I was, yeah, not in a particularly good mental space at the time, and really sort of just very exacerbated is probably the right word, because you sort of, you change something, you go, fine, it'd be better now, and it's not, and you go, okay, right, okay, need to sort of rip up the rule book here and try and reinvent things.
Yeah, well, and do it on your terms, which is, for me, as we've literally just released a book called "If You Don't Like Your Boss, Burn the Boats," and it's a story of us. I read it as a story, but it's based on, honestly, stories like one you've just told me, plus, well, thousands now of others, and it's just the common threads I saw through there. I was like, and it's that moment people realize, you know what, I've got my own life. If I'm giving up 10, 12 hours a day, you got to sleep for 8. I mean, people sleep on less, but you're supposed to sleep for 7 or 8. So I've got 4 hours left, and I'm giving them all for the billable God, I call it, to go. And it's not so much that you're not paid well. You are paid well in comparison to the rest of the world, the rest of society, but it's the disparity between what you do for it and the amount that's being made at the top, the cream, is so far removed, which blew me away when I got into it, because I came from an industry which was razor thin margins, electrical wholesaling. While I did my law degree, I was working in that. Margins were just so tight in construction. And I got into this and I was like, the margins are so thick. You could pay the senior associates and the people doing all these hours so much better, which is obviously my journey, was helping a consultancy program, big one over there, Taylor Rose, because I saw, oh, that's a perfect entry for people to just at least taste some self-employment and get paid a bit better to do it. But you decided to launch Imprint.
Yeah.
Did you have, like, when you actually made the leap, did you already have clients lined up, or did you have a restraint of trade, or was it a nerve-wracking first few months?
So I did not bring over a single client as in not from any pre-existing ones, because restrictive covenants were still in place. So the boutique move, that was packed in before my restrictive covenants at the prior place had expired. So I guess I went into self-employment still subject of 2 sets, essentially. So I'd saved a bit, essentially, a sort of a buffer zone to sort of tide me over, because I was fully prepared that 6 months would be realistically probably wouldn't be earning what I had been before. But thereafter, I've and this will probably get us onto how we sort of got in touch, but thereafter I've sort of found various sort of IP specific outreach platforms where essentially I would get delivered weekly notices of people running into sort of challenges, the types of objections in the UK and EU, basically. So I will get that raw data in on a weekly basis, and you can sort of go through and see. And in the case of, obviously, parties who don't have prior representation, which you can see from the public database fairly easily, that sort of started some initial client relationships. There's law firms overseas that I've worked with for many years who sort of referred work. There's also people who aren't lawyers per se, but other brand consultants who work in sort of more the say social media aspects or brand creation, bringing it to market, etc., who have given me some very good referrals over time. So it's kind of a combination of things, really. But I have a few clients from previous jobs, but it's been a mixture of all of them, really.
And so first, now you're 18 months in, so you survived the first year. Not everyone gets through their first year in business. 18 months in, has there been any regrets or any, I wish I'd done it, I hadn't done it, or I wish I'd done it sooner?
I think probably wish I'd maybe done it about a year sooner, I would say,
Yep.
because I think the 6 to 9 months of my stint at the international law firm, I was quite actively looking to move. And then obviously the subsequent move did not pan out how I wanted. So I think that's probably maybe a year which I could have got more out of had I have just taken the plunge then. But obviously a year is not in the working in your sort of working lifetime, it's not a huge amount of time. So I don't really reflect upon that negatively. I think my two learnings or big learnings I've had are I originally started wanting the business to essentially serve as a brand consultancy. So it would have bolt-ons. So you've probably seen on my email, the sort of the tagline is it's creative, legal, social, and legal sits in the middle. That is the central pillar where what we do is legal advice. But the bolt-ons were relating to sort of creation of brand or sort of social media, scaling your brand through that sort of thing. Now, the idea was initially to have those as sort of supplementary services via use of third-party contractors, etc. And quite quickly, I actually realised that that was probably actually diluting the USP of what we actually want to be putting out to the market, which is obviously just stellar IP advice for startup scaling businesses. So that we're actually in the process of sort of doing a rebrand, retaining the name Imprint, but sort of our USP and how we appear to the market. So I think that was a learning, but again, adopted that strategy where you see from a lot of founders is and fails is a strong word, but whether it's recruitment or branding, whatever, they always say fail fast. If it's not working for you, just don't hesitate, change it. So that's one thing. I think another aspect is this area is super deadline sensitive that we work in. There are deadlines for most things. And don't underestimate the importance of putting time, effort, possibly even capital into operations and processes, because you will get the time, you will get a return on it. I understand that not immediately, but in terms of that free time you get to be focusing on the stuff that you should be, you will get it back tenfold. And it kind of goes back to that classic mantra. There's they're based in Washington, actually about 10-15 years ahead of me, and when I was starting out, was really adamantly listening to all their podcasts on sort of how they were going about starting, scaling, etc. And the one thing they kept saying is make sure you're working on the business, not in the business. So if you have your sort of operations processes really stellar and working nice and smoothly from the get-go, it will save you so much time in whether it's chasing invoices or sorting client engagement or other onboarding bits and pieces. So those are the two things I think that I have sort of learnt over the last 18 months in particular.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And that's part of, for me, to get a plug in for us. That's what we're trying to do in the league, is to, as I tell anyone, business is about making 1,000 mistakes, figuring out the 20 things that actually work, and then doing those 20 things repeatedly in a systemized way. And then you'll scale, you'll grow to whatever you wanted to. But as I tell everyone, if we all make the 1,000 mistakes, it'll take us 5 years to get there. But if collectively we can bring the solos together and go, oh, I tried this Facebook group, or I tried this advertising, or I tried this type of outreach, and that didn't work, but I tried it this way and it did work. I go, well, awesome. We can all learn that lesson together and grow together, and then have more referrals. So my final question I did want to ask is the kind of thing that, and I know you don't know a lot about Sell, we're going to talk about that off the record after this, but the kind of concept of Sell, do you think that's something that would work in the UK, bringing together self-employed lawyers and boutiques so they can learn together and also refer work to each other?
I do. So there's a firm over here. They're actually a US firm, but they slightly different point, but there are definitely parallels. But they had a massive drive a few years ago on sort of diversity and inclusion. And they always used to say, how can you expect to have the same person in the building as a lawyer and shoehorn them into every single client relationship? And you sort of, clients want, in a lot of cases, they want to be able to feel comfortable that you are listening to them, you actually understand, and you can sort of empathize with what they're going through, to be perfectly honest. And to bring it back to the Self-Employed Lawyers League, the difficulty a lot of self-employed lawyers will have, whether that is in Australia or the UK, is that we will market ourselves, or I can't speak to how others want to market themselves, but I will market myself in a way to be like, I'm a startup, I'm a scaling business. You're a startup, you're a scaling business. Now, if for example, your trademark gets challenged and you're looking at a really costly dispute, and you go to behemoth law firm turning over $750 million GBP a year, they don't understand. They don't understand probably your cost base. They won't understand that you might have intentions of seeking investment or exiting. It's just the actual experiences, the interests, and the targets for both those entities, client and behemoth law firm, are just so far apart, complete chalk and cheese. And what's quite nice is a lot of the clients I work with, we will have similar strains, difficulties, experiences. The problem comes, I'm obviously an IP lawyer by trade, is if a client, and this happens, they have other issues which are not related to IP, I obviously can't advise on from a technical standpoint, also not insured to in any event. So at that point, it becomes really important to have those relationships. And I can't just pull up Microsoft Teams and go, oh, who's the construction lawyer on the 4th floor, or whatever it might be. So to have that, I think would be really invaluable, because you essentially want, if you're going to refer your client to another lawyer, you want them to kind of, their experiences with that other lawyer to align, and there be sort of, I guess, symmetry between them, where they're going, oh, they also understand sort of how I'm operating, rather than, because we only operate on a fixed price model. But if I then send a client to a big international law firm, they're going to go, wow, the hourly rates have doubled. There's no certainty on pricing, and the experience is probably going to be really terrible and shocking for them comparably. So I think to have that symmetry, not be, I guess, in a silo, tunnel vision with what you're doing, and then suddenly a client goes, what about this? And you're sort of going, oh, it's very, very hard to find someone who does what I do in my exact field, because even previous law firms I've worked at, they don't align with, I guess, my USP, what I want to deliver clients, like another self-employed lawyer would. So there is, I would say, definitely a market for it. And I think infamously, a lot of lawyers will say that the best source of work is referrals. I mean, it's the time from when you get the prospect or generate the lead to actually converting tends to be so much shorter via a referral from another lawyer, compared to, say, if I'm trawling LinkedIn or other types of cold outreach. So yeah, I mean, from my own experience, it is something that I would theoretically use. Yes.
Yep. No, and I'll be using that, and depending when this comes out, we'll be looking in the near future to see what we can do in the UK. But George, what's the best way for people to lawyers to obviously refer if they've got IP work, but also people to find you and get in touch with you?
Generally, I would probably say LinkedIn is quite a good way. So to my knowledge, I think I'm the only George Mattey, spelled Mattey, on LinkedIn. Otherwise, we're having our website and domains and stuff overhauled at the minute, and changed. So that's why I'm suggesting LinkedIn, as opposed to those emails, because they will soon be changing and auto forwarding. But yeah, probably LinkedIn.
No, perfect. And we'll put, when this comes out, we'll put that in the show notes. So George, thanks for being on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.